What the Navy? Comms check.
Read you Lehman Charlie, Harmony.
Read you the same. Break Davis.
Lima Charlie.
Roger, break guests.
Lima Charlie.
Roger, break Broadus.
Lima Charlie.
Read you the same. Comms check complete. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this episode of What the Navy. Today's guests are Master Chief Crandall and CTR2 Broadus. Today's episode's topic is about communication, the lack thereof. So today's episode will be called Comms Check. For those of us that have been to the fleet and know what that means, excellent. For those of you that have not, well, find a fleet sailor and they'll explain it to you. So, without further ado, Master Chief Crandall, Pastor Broadus, welcome to this episode. And 100 years worth of experience here for the Navy between Master Chief Crandall, myself, and Chief, and plus Davis and Broadus. I would say roughly about 100 years. I'm just doing math on the fly. Don't try to fact check that. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. So, but one of the things that I've encountered, and what I'm sure Davis and Broadus will attest to, is lack of communication. We have all of these tools for communication, and yet somehow things are always missed. You'll get something last minute, and it's just frustrating because this could have been. You find out on a Wednesday that you could have taken care of this on Thursday of last week, but nobody told you until Tuesday that it's due by Wednesday. And sometimes that task is I don't want to use a big word, a monumental task that required that 5 days, but you have to cram it all into just a few hours and pray that it's good enough, and so you can move on with the rest of your day. So, Davis, Broadus, have you guys encountered that at all?
For sure.
I definitely have, especially lately.
Yeah. Sometimes I understand it because it's like the LPOs and stuff are given certain things at the last minute as well from their senior leadership, and then so forth and so forth and so forth. So sometimes I understand it, but then at the same time, it's like this is putting extra stress on those who are given the information, especially if you see, I understand the whole chain of command process and stuff, but if it's information that, let's say the chief is wants to push down or whatever, but he's already standing there in front of the sailors at which he needs that information from, I don't see why they can't just go ahead and just tell it or say it and ask for them sailors, especially when we don't always see our higher leadership, especially with COVID going on. We don't always see face or communicate with them on a day-to-day basis just due to that alone, and having to try to balance work as well.
I definitely agree with Davis about that. Just making sure that, we're told stuff in a timely manner, because I know in my case, I deal with two different, I have a split week. So one half of the week, I see my Navy leadership, and then the other half of the week, I may or may not see one or two people in the Navy. And with me dealing with a lot of paperwork, I do get those, okay, today's Monday. If I close the business on Wednesday, mind you, I don't work on Wednesday. You need this. So then it's okay, I can just focus on all of my Navy stuff, and then I have to kind of neglect my job a little bit in order to get those documents or that paperwork where it needs to be in a timely manner. So communication is kind of it's really hard right now, especially with Davis was saying, the COVID-19 going on and everything. It's very, very hard to, I guess, for it to flow smoothly. It's not really flowing in the way that it normally does, because normally we see each other all week, and then it's okay, this is put out Monday, it's due by Friday, and when. But deadlines are just a little bit faster right now because of COVID.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. If you don't mind, Master Chief.
Yeah, go for it.
And so, before I forget, Payoffs of Battaglia, I think we're at about probably 50 to 60 years of experience versus 100. Because 100, I think we'd all have 20 years. We'd all be in for 20
I
years.
asked for the math to not be done. 2 plus 2 equals 7.
Hey, so hey, check it out. I feel y'all's pain. And I get exactly where you're coming from because my division sailors get it too. Needless to say, COVID-19, we're in this unique, fluid environment, and this is all coming from my perspective, right? We've been in it for what, 6 months now. And personally speaking, still learning an environment where my division sailors, they don't necessarily work with me where I am, in the same organization. Y'all know how it goes, right? Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're lucky enough to have Navy leadership in the same office as like operational leadership. That's not the case for me, and schedules change. And I want to thank y'all in advance for being patient while we polish up our communication systems. In some cases, completely restructure our communication systems. I think it was Petty Officer Davis who mentioned, chief is there or senior leadership is there. Why not just tell me right there? That's a great question. I've always been a fan. When did this start? At least since I've been a chief petty officer, I've always been a fan of having that functional structure of communication. The traditional time-proven system that we've used, right? So you have work center supervisors who, respond to leading petty officers. You have leading petty officers who respond to leading chief petty officers. You have leading chief petty officers who communicate with division officers. Division officers communicate with department heads. Department heads communicate with directors, so on and so forth, which allows the flow of communication to be proper in that functional structure, and doesn't leave anyone out of the communications flow. Because just thinking about that triad of LPO, chief, division officer, you wouldn't want to be in one of those positions and have no idea what's going on with your division or your department because you were skipped over, right? Or at least that's not the case for me. So sometimes that's the struggle, especially now. That's the struggle that we deal with, because do we want to honor that proven communication system, or do we want to go more for convenience and possibly leave leadership who they may not have to have all the details, right? But they should have some idea of what's going on with the sailors, right? Because it's all of our responsibility, right? And so that's a problem. That's a problem. That's not, I'll be honest, I do not believe that is a unique problem in whatever division you're in, whatever department you're in. We're all in the same directorate. And I can confidently say that because, listen, that's a problem in my division. That's a problem in my sister divisions, especially during this COVID-19 environment. So I'll leave it at that because I've been talking for about 7 minutes now. But
Yes, I would add that a lot of what it comes down to communication and getting the information down, there's kind of two pieces to it. One is the time management piece, right? Getting the information to the people at the right time so that they have enough time to fill whatever tasks are required. And sometimes, people just prioritize poorly. And so they end up, wasting a lot of time that they could have done by just getting the word out initially and then letting it kind of trickle down. But another piece, and the biggest thing when it comes to communication for me is kind of fostering this idea of emotional intelligence. And that's kind of the idea that you're in tune with other people's requirements and feelings, right? Because the whole point of communication is to be understood. And I see it all the time where people will communicate something, but they'll communicate it in the way that they feel is the way it needs to be communicated, right? But that's not the way the recipient potentially is going to need to hear it, right? And so I think, you know, Chief and I being former instructors, we understand that sometimes people need to hear things different ways in order to understand that. And so that's really helped me as a communicator to kind of understand specifically how to get my point across. And some things that we don't really think about just inherently are really important when it comes to communicating. And one of those that I always try to do is to repeat myself, because often when you're talking to somebody, they'll nod and they'll say, yeah, got it, and they have no idea what you're talking about, right? But they're just too embarrassed to admit, like, say, hey, hold on, stop what you're saying, go back, you know, a little bit and explain what you meant by that, right? They're not going to say that. But you can kind of, if you're emotionally intelligent and you get these cues from people, then you can often kind of mitigate that and repeat yourself, you know, and just kind of say it a different way. It's not that you're being a broken record, but it's the idea that you are really driving home what's most important. And I think that those are two things, you know, between time management and then one really kind of being emotionally intelligent and picking up on the cues of others, or those are the two most successful things I've done just as a communicator, both in and out of the baby. So that would be like two things that I think anyone watching or whatever, those are like my biggest pieces of advice, definitely.
Master Chief, I feel like I agree with what you said. A lot of people, especially in the military, they don't necessarily talk to people in a way to where they're trying to figure out any other emotions that might be behind it. Like, I know for me, my mom used to always tell me like, you need to work on your tone. Cause I used to be like, I'm just saying the information. And they're like, no, you need to work on your tone, like your tone with people, because you sound like you have an attitude and all this stuff. And I would listen to myself. She recorded me once and she was like, see, listen to yourself. And I listened to myself and I was like, wow, you know, I kind of did. And at the same time, I feel like I had to really be aware of how I put out information or how I communicated with someone in a sense. But I know in the military, a lot of it, I can only speak from encounters with like senior leadership. So I reference the senior leadership a lot because I'm only a junior sailor. There's a lot of instances where, you know, senior leaderships are communicating with junior sailors and stuff, but they don't necessarily pick up the cues that how this person obviously seems very stressed out, and obviously especially if they don't normally have like a certain tone about them. But I feel like with that though, with understanding to pick on those cues, unless you're like a subject matter expert at it, like yourself, Master Chief, you don't necessarily know how to. So that's when we come into play, and it also leads to other aspects of now we have tension between the sailors, and now it's that frustration, and now you have where there isn't time taken out to like just step aside and ask the sailors like, hey, what's going on with your life and stuff. Because I remember I would see encounters even within like my own like division when I first joined, and I would see like these interactions, and I could clear as day see that the junior sailor was like about to cry. And I eventually, after they would talk, I would talk to them, be like, hey, what's going on and stuff. And then they would just vent this whole session to me. And I was like, I don't think any of these like LPOs in training at least know exactly the implications of the type of way that they're communicating, that everybody doesn't take information the same way. And some people just don't know how to put information out in a different way for someone else to understand.
Yeah, I totally. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Master Chief, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
And I think I'm confident Master Chief will agree. I don't think any of us are experts in communication. It's just one of those things that you are always going to hear that at a lessons learned, right? What's the problem that we had? Communication. And it's always one of them things that are overlooked, under prioritized. It's always going to be an issue because of that thing that you mentioned, Petty Officer Davis. And you mentioned a couple things, LPO and training thing. Okay, let me turn a different route. So we are, I suppose, leadership is expected to be, or are expected to be, leaders in or experts in communication, right? But there'll always be a trend. Right now, in 10 years, in 20 years, at this command, on this ship, wherever you go, that's never going to be the case. It's never going to be the case, and it cannot be assumed, my personal opinions, it cannot be assumed that the way you're communicating is effective communication to anybody, right? Not just leadership, but to everybody. So not everyone is going to pick up those subtle cues, right? Those things that someone else otherwise would pick up. So don't know which way this conversation is going to go, but I would challenge everyone, myself, you, I would challenge us to practice more effective communication, more of the this is the message that I have. This is the message that I intend on transmitting to you, right? After I transmit this message to you, like Master Chief was saying, some type of feedback is going to be invaluable. Some type of feedback saying that you've understood, right? And what's the easiest way for a lot of us to do that is just to confirm, does that make sense? That's an example. That's an example, right? Did that make sense to you? I know I was probably talking, for example, I was probably talking really fast, and I'm in 3-4 different directions right now, but did that make sense to you, right? If you have any issues turning this in tomorrow, right? Do you know what it is that we need you to turn in, right? Do you know why it needs to be turned in? Do you know why it's so important that it needs to be turned in tomorrow? Like, do you get that, right? That obviously that's the most overt way, or that's one of the most overt ways that I can communicate, right? Without seeming like someone who's insensitive to what people have going on. Does that make sense?
Oh, that definitely makes
Makes
sense.
That's a question and that's an example.
Yep, that
Oh.
makes sense. So I know
But you know
for
what, Chief? Oh, go ahead.
I know for me, for some of the times where I've been ineffective in my communication, is they'll ask me why, and I grew up. This is exactly how my dad would run it. Given the task, execute. You asked why, the answer was because I told you to. And that's just how I was brought up. I'm sure some others here have been brought up that way, and it worked. But going into the military setting, you have juniors that will always ask you why you got to do this, and you got to be prepared to have that answer. Otherwise, they're not going to execute it in the right way that you want it, or they're just going to complain to higher leadership. They're going to jump you and say, hey, so-and-so's not telling me why I have to do this task, and next thing you know, you're in the chief's office and you're explaining why you couldn't tell them why they had to do something. That's just one of the, and then also being told you're an abrasive communicator. That was just an example, but so that's why I always make sure if I don't know why they're going to do something, I ask the person that's giving me the task, why do I need to have them do this? So this way, if I'm asked by the junior sailor, I can at least communicate what someone else told me of why it needs to be done if I can't figure it out on my own. So
yeah, we see that a lot, especially up in the senior leadership levels, where people don't effectively understand, why they're doing the thing they do. They're just trying to communicate it across so it gets off their plate, and that's not the way to do things. If you don't understand fundamentally what you're supposed to be conveying to somebody, how are they going to understand it, right? There's no way that that's going to ever turn into a situation that's good. And, you know, one of the things that I always kind of try to do is I try to be a little bit, and it's kind of going back to that emotional intelligence idea too, is I try to be a bit empathetic too. And I think to myself, how would I want to know this information and how would I want to be communicated with? And so a lot of those kind of self-reflection questions are what motivates me to do things like follow-up emails or going and talking with somebody. All these things that I know would be really helpful for me, I try to do those for other people as well. And sure, it takes more time out of my day or whatever, but in the long run, you're a more effective communicator. You get more stuff done. You know, it's just a matter of kind of building that habit. But unfortunately, it's really hard in this day and age, you know, especially this year, to try to get all that done. I mean, I remember as a div chief, you know, on the watch floor in Maryland, I would go and I would go to every shift and go and check in with them, see how they're doing. And I usually would not talk work stuff. I would just talk about whatever, you know, my kind of trick was to talk to them about movies. Everyone watches movies. Everyone loves movies, you know. And so I could start a conversation with sailors about whatever movie's out right now or whatever, and it would always lead into something else, right? And that was kind of one of my tricks, is just to kind of do that. But how do you do that over Microsoft Teams? How do you do that over Zoom? You know, it's much more difficult nowadays. And what we've been doing, you know, like for example with the Master Chiefs, we typically only check in with each other once a week. We have a meeting once a week in person, and we would go through and just kind of go over everything's going on, and you know, whatever we're doing on Slack or email and stuff as well, but mostly just really checking in once a week. So now, under the current constraints, we actually meet up at least twice, sometimes 3 times a week as the Master Chiefs, just to make sure everything's going well and everything's going okay, all virtually, obviously. But that's really, it's still not the same. You know, it's not the same as sitting in a room with somebody and being like, hey, I've noticed that you're quiet today or whatever. Like, we don't have that option anymore, really. But it's still that over communicating digitally kind of compensates for that in-person, you know, lack thereof, basically. So,
And to piggyback on Master Chief, right? That over communication, so this is what y'all gonna have to help me out on, right? Because it's been a while since I've been a second class petty officer. It's been a while since I've been a third class seaman, first class petty officer, right? So I don't know. And this is why I'm a really big fan of having these types of conversations, so that I can get inside of y'all head, so that y'all can get inside of our head, so that we can make all of this stuff work, right? Especially in this environment. It's a really big deal. But, you know, just as senior enlisted leadership has an opportunity, it's always going to be an opportunity to be able to interact with sailors, right? Just as we have that opportunity to do that, right? And come forward and initiate that conversation, initiate that communication with junior sailors, with all sailors. Junior sailors and all sailors also have that opportunity to do that with their senior enlisted leadership as well, right? And so I suppose my next question is, how do y'all feel about that, right? In the case of a second class petty officer, how do you feel about initiating that conversation with your leading petty officer, with your leading chief petty officer, so on and so forth, right? Is that something that you are enabled to do? Is that something that you're empowered or encouraged to do? The answer is yes. But in reality, is that how you feel? You know?
Broadus, you go first.
Oh yeah, Broadus, you can go first. Mm-hmm.
So for me, initiating conversations with my LPO, I know that the option is there, and the LPO that I have right now, I am pretty comfortable with having conversations with him. I'm actually going to have a conversation with him very soon, because so that I can know that we're on the same page when it comes to like me meeting the expectations that he has, and him understanding why I may not be able to meet some of the expectations with the deadlines that he's given me. Because, for example, I have a daughter, so working really late may work for one sailor where it won't work for me, because I have to go get my child. So that's one of the conversations that we had to have the other day. I'm like, okay, I know that you need this, that, and the third by this time, but can there be like, can we meet somewhere in the middle and I just give you this, that, and the third, and then I'll come in on this day as well in order to give you the rest of what is needed so that I can still take care of my family. So I know for me, it's very necessary for me to be very open and communicate a lot with my leadership, because there are times where it's like almost impossible for me to meet some of the deadlines because I can't work those late hours. So I feel pretty comfortable. It took me a minute to get to that point. Actually, this is like the first portion of my time here in Hawaii where I felt like I had an LPO that I could really talk to and really communicate with. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, it took a little bit of time, but I'm pretty comfortable with talking to my LPO, and I do communicate my discrepancies most of the time.
So it seems like you have a better quality of life right now. You're an important contributing member to your organization, and a lot of that probably comes from being able to just have a conversation like that with your LPO, right?
Yes, Chief.
That's going to be a common theme, from here on, right? If it's the other side of the spectrum, if you cannot be comfortable enough to, voice your concerns, if you can't be comfortable enough, this is my opinion, if you can't be comfortable enough to do that with your leadership, right, with your first line leadership, the next in command, you're gonna have a rough time. You're gonna have a rough time, and you are a great example, right? Because you've been through a rough patch, and you're going through something that's really good, which is pretty cool because we're in this weird environment, right? So you have your personal situation, you have your child, and now you're able to share that with your leading petty officer, and it's a good thing, right? But it's not always the case, right? I would say
Right.
you're one of the lucky ones, right? Who knows that they can do that, right? And a lot of times it's not a matter of being restricted by someone else to do that. A lot of times it's restricting yourself and coming forward and being able to share those personal sensitive things that you wouldn't want. You would feel comfortable sharing this with close friends and family members, but to someone who you're not like this with, it may not be as easy, right? So again, that's the thing that I have to challenge myself with every day. That's what I challenge y'all with every day, right? And it doesn't have to be, we don't have to get into super sensitive details about medical conditions and
Right.
personal life, right? But if we have something, some beam, some idea that there may be something else that we need to give, we need to reserve our highest priority to, right? Which is you guys, right? If we are given some type of reminder, it goes very far, right? It doesn't have to be me. It could be your LPO. It could be your work center supervisor. It could be your mission manager. But communication works up and down the chain of command. So what you got, Petty Officer Davis? Because you've been holding on to something.
No. I was just wanted to say, like, it's crazy that we don't have a training on communication. That's
Actually, there's a
the
whole
crazy
PQS
part about
on
it,
it.
because communication in general as a baseline, for anybody, especially in the workforce or anything, I'm surprised, like the military, we don't have a training on that. Like we talk about it a lot and stuff, but we don't necessarily sit down and have that training. Like, this is the type of communications that are effective. This is how you learn how to talk to someone in a different way, and make it aware to people that someone might not receive the information the same way that you receive the information, and the difference between like work communication and like personal communication. Because I know for me, in my instance, like, like Pedro Broda said, like she sees some people some days and less people the next day. Some of my leadership, because of where I'm positioned at or whatever, I don't necessarily see them. And I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I don't even know where, like, when it after my LPO, I don't even know where they sit at half of the time, anyways. Um, and I would have like you would have like some in those instances, some leadership that would come out their way and make it that extra step to come down and talk to us junior sailors and stuff. Because they know we don't know where they sit, and they know like because of rank, a lot of people have that reservation where, oh, I don't want to go talk to them, because like that's chief, or they sit next to like a captain or something, and that right there alone is just nerves by itself. So I feel like on a personal level, I have no problem like communicating with my leadership on a work environment and stuff, but because like the Navy's supposed to be like my second family and stuff like that, I don't necessarily say that all of my leadership, or there might be like 2 out of my leadership that I actually would talk to on a normal basis and everything. Half the time is because one of the factors is because I see face to them in general, because I have to like communicate with them. But as far as like once after my OPO, I don't know where they sit half the time. And when I do see them, it's not necessarily a hi, how's it going? How's your weekend type deal. It's they're coming down to talk to a different, like to the LPOs or something, and give them information and pass out on the log, and then go out about our merry way. And that used to frustrate me so much, because I would see, like in one of my instances, I would have like a senior leadership come down and stuff and talk to like the LPO who's like sitting right next to 4 their junior sailors. And I'm just like waiting. I'm like, so, you don't want to interrupt their conversation, what's going on, but it's like, so are you going to at least like turn your head and be like, hey, good morning? Because I like never see you at all and stuff. You don't want to do that awkward, good morning, like, good morning, hello, like, especially when they're like walking away and it's like, oh, okay, they must have been in a rush. But then if they repeatedly do it and they look at you dead in your face, and then you're like, okay, good morning. And we're like, okay, nod, then go about their merry way. But then you can see them have a full conversation with the next person that has nothing to do with work. It's kind of like, well, dang, like I just don't come to you about personal stuff, because I don't have that personal relationship with you.
Sure. Yeah. No. You ever heard the term leading up the chain of command?
I haven't.
No.
I can't. Oh. So leading up the chain in command. So we're all leaders. We all have the opportunity to be a leader. Leading up the chain of command, if something isn't going a way you think would be a way that would contribute positively to your organization, right? Communication, how effective mission is, whatnot, right? As a leader, it's your opportunity and it's your responsibility to say something, to speak up, right? So if you want that from someone, or if you need that from someone, right? Because we need that. We need that. Most of us do. I know I do. I need to be able to, I cannot do the Zoom stuff every freaking day. I can't do it. I can't do it effectively as a chief petty officer, as a sailor. It's not going to work. I need that personal interaction, right? I need to be able to see my division officer in person, right? I need to be able to see my LPO. I need to be able to see my sailors in person, right? So it's not just something that it's not just for me at least, it's not just a convenience thing. It's not just something that's going to be more effective. That's what I like socially and emotionally need, right? And if you're someone who needs that, right, and you may not be up here in the leadership ladder, right? You may be down here, right? If you need that, somebody has to know, right? You got to let somebody know, right? And if it's the case where how you explained, this conversation is happening, but it's not happening with you, well, it's in your right to be able to say something, right? Because that's may seem like a convenient thing right now, but that may be something that you need, right? And if you don't work on that now, it's going to be very difficult to build up on that as a first class petty officer, right? It's going to be very difficult to reinforce that as you go up, right? So what an opportunity you have right now as a brand new CT. I'm talking to you, Petty Officer Davis. So as a brand new CTR2, to be able to build on your foundation now, right? We talked about it in a couple, actually, I think it was like the second episode or the third episode, Navy, right? What an opportunity we have. I think it was What Inspires Us. What an opportunity we have. It's a cool, weird kind of experiment where something's not going right. As long as you don't get in trouble, you can roll out in a couple of years, right? Take this opportunity now to build, to set your foundation of effective communication, right? And that's going to help you tremendously in any position that you're in, right? You don't have to be leading petty officer or chief petty officer to do that. You start that now. So it's seamless as you move up. So, Master Chief, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would add that a big piece of this is being approachable, right? And coming in, as you go up in the chain of command, as you promote and whatnot, which will happen, right? You have to remember what it was like to be a junior sailor. I've been in for over 20 years at this point. I've been a chief for way longer than I was ever a white hat. But at this point, the thing that motivates me and the thing that keeps me going is remembering what it was like when I had those chiefs or LPOs who weren't communicating in the way that I needed it, or whatever it happened to be, right? And so that's a really important thing. And I think a lot of it goes back to last week's topic, which was, humility, right? And so as you get higher up in the ranks, you get certain privileges, but those privileges don't make you, right? And so a big part of that is remaining humble, remaining approachable, like allowing people to want to come and see you if there is a problem, right? I had a problem. This is about 12 years ago, but I was a new chief, and I had this issue with bullying in my workplace, and I had no clue that any of this was going on, right? How would I know that these guys were doing this thing to another junior sailor, right? I had no idea any of that was going on, but it took one sailor who came to see me. We had a really good rapport, right? And he knew the implications of what he was doing. He felt like he was betraying his fellow service members and all the other stuff, right? His colleagues and friends. But he came and told me what was going on, and I felt two things. One was extreme anger that it was even happening, right? That this poor sailor was getting bullied. But the second one was that I was just so much gratitude that I had a sailor who came to me with a problem and was brave enough to come and do that, and that I was approachable enough that he felt comfortable doing that. And so it's weird, communication doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to kind of work on you as a person, the whole sailor that you are, and it includes things like humility and being approachable and stuff in order to be an effective communicator as well. So there's no one ticket for any of this. It's really about kind of working on all those little skills. So that's really all I have.
Yes, Master Chief. I'm glad that you pointed that out. I forgot about that. Because that is a problem that I've seen in my command. We just, switched over to a new CO, but like our old CO, I saw the same junior sailors that were scared or like just reserved to like come up to like chiefs or master chiefs or senior chiefs. They had no problem with speaking to the CO. And I was like, that's a problem. Like when you're comfortable enough to talk to an 06, but you're not that comfortable enough to talk to like our E6s, E7, E8s, and E9s and stuff. I was like, that's a big problem. And that comes into play with approachability. And I've seen where in a lot of instances, like there's a lot of, I'm just going to put like the chief's mess in a whole, not saying everybody, but I'm just going to say the general population or whatever. I've seen where a lot it's just like approachability. Like people just don't want to approach senior leadership because maybe they just have a RBF face. That might just be it. And they don't realize it. But it is sometimes very scary to approach senior leadership just because of we know the rankings and stuff like that. And it's not every day that we're actually interacting with the higher ups and everything. So it's like, and so you get that experience of constantly encountering and constantly like just having a simple hi, good morning, how you doing, Master Chief? How you doing, Senior Chief? You don't build that confidence to even initiate it yourself until it like reverses. Because I know for me, I didn't really feel comfortable just like I would say good morning to like anyone who was above an E6, but I would just leave it at that. Good morning and just keep walking. But it took like my department head and like some senior chiefs and stuff, like they would randomly just start having conversations with me, and then I became more and more comfortable with speaking to higher ups. I'm like, oh, like maybe they just got an RBF and I just didn't know. Like, oh, they're actually really nice. Like a lot of like the encounters, especially with new junior sailors coming in to the commands and stuff straight out of A school and everything, a lot of it is, oh, the response is always, oh, they're actually really nice. Like, I'm not scared to talk to them. And then I see them talking to them again or having another conversation. And I feel like it's easier for higher ranking to talk to someone lower ranking, but it's always more difficult for a lower ranking person to talk to someone who's higher ranking just because of that rank reservation in general.
So Davis, I've actually encountered. This is the last say, then we'll go to final words, and then we'll cut out for the rest of the day because it's gonna be a fun edit. But I agree with you. Some people do have that kind of face, myself included. Apparently, I look angry all the time. But some of the first classes I encountered as a junior sailor, some chiefs, some officers, they just look like they're really mean and really angry. Actually, they're probably the most funniest guys I ever met. So, like I said in the last episode, it doesn't matter if your LPO looks like they're angry or looks like they're stressed. They're going to do their job and help you and talk to you. So, and if they aren't doing their job, let somebody know. But, so, final words for Master Chief. Go ahead.
So I would add just one last thing to kind of talk about, and it's a kind of a challenge to the senior leaders, the LPOs, and on up, is that when a junior sailor kind of comes and talks to you, right? We're kind of going on this whole theme here. They're typically talking to you because they want you to solve a problem, right? They're coming to you with an issue, and they may not be, they may not explicitly say, "Hey, I have this problem. What can you do for me, Chief?" or whatever it happens to be, right? But that's just an inherent human thing, right? That we're going to go to the authority figures when we have an issue, and it's really important as a leader to recognize that that's happening, right? That a sailor's coming and talk to you, and there's going to be something involved with that. They may just be talking about their dog or whatever, but there's something else going on. They need help in some way, right? And it may not be anything other than they just wanted to get the words out and have their own little venting session, or it may be that they need you to do some sort of action. And I think it's really important for us, staying on that humility and being approachable thing, is to really think about that and to say, okay, if a sailor's coming and talking to me, how can I improve whatever's going on in their lives right now, right? And I think if we have that kind of idea in our heads, just one human to another, I think that that's really an effective way, not only of communicating, but really of the whole idea of mission accomplishment, getting done what needs to get done. Those really fundamental ideas, I think, are really important when it comes to communication. I love to break things down into very simple parts, and that's just kind of one of my ideas, is taking this thing, being approachable, letting a sailor come to you, using that emotional intelligence to kind of figure out what is it they're actually saying, what do they need to hear, and then kind of going from there. So that's really all I had. I appreciate you guys having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, Master Chief. Thank you for joining us. Chief Peavy, your turn.
And
you get 15 seconds though.
Hey, so real quick, just to piggyback on Master Chief Crandall, right? Just as effective as leadership catching those cues, right? If Pay Officer Davis, Pay Officer Brodus, right? Pay Officer Battaglia, if you're talking to leadership and it's just not, it doesn't seem what you're trying to communicate is catching on. All right, how else can I do this? How else can I communicate this? Right? It can be just as effective, right? Don't leave that conversation without getting whatever you need solved, right? That's in a lot of cases, that's the point of the conversation, or you just want to talk, right? But there is more possibility than less that you may have to reword what you're saying or recommunicate it, right? And that's in understanding that we're not all communications experts, right? So thank you in advance for keeping that in mind, right? Thank you for advancing and giving that consideration. And doesn't seem like it came out right the first time. Just try it a second time, right? So,
All right.
communication.
Thank you, Chief. Davis, 30 seconds.
All I have to say is, for any senior leadership out there watching this video right now, as a junior sailor, we do want to talk to you guys. A lot of it is we're just reserved because of the rank positions, that mentality that we have when we're coming out of boot camp. You know, we're just scared to talk to senior leadership. That's it. And a lot of the times, you know, we don't see face. So when we have the opportunity, like, we might be scared, but please take the opportunity to like get to know us and stuff. And just for anybody out there, any rank, be self-conscious of how you relay information and your tone. A lot of it is a simple fact of your tone just might not be it for that conversation. So take some type of accountability and be self-aware of how you're saying things as well.
Rodis, 30 seconds.
I guess I'll talk to the junior leadership since Davis covered the senior leadership. So for anybody that's in junior leadership, I guess like E5 and below, don't be scared to reach out to senior leadership if you're having an issue, because we're all human. They don't know what we're going through, just like we may not know what they're going through. So make sure you're establishing those relationships if they haven't been established, because you're the only person, like, you should care more about your career than they do. So it's important to establish those relationships to make sure that, you know, if you do run into a tough time, or if you do have something going on that, you know, you normally wouldn't feel comfortable talking to someone about, you would have already had that relationship established to be able to talk to them. And to piggyback on Davis, senior leadership, please come and talk to us, because we enjoy having conversations with you all just as much as you guys probably enjoy having conversations with us, or wanting to have conversations with us, so that we know that you care about what's going on in the bottom of the Navy. So that's all.
Excellent. Thank you, Davis. Or thank you, Broadus. Sorry. Brain. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. My brain is not online. Anyways.
It's 08, actually. It's 08.
Well, I need to hurry up because I have an appointment at 09. All right.
Thank you all so much.
All right, guys, take it easy. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one, Master
Have
Chief.
a good Labor Day
You too,
weekend.
Broadus.
Later. You too.
Great. Bye.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of What the Navy. Please give us a like and subscribe and hit the notification button so you can catch all of our episodes as they're uploaded or when we go live. If you would like to be a part of the show and have a topic that you would like covered, please email us at whatthenavy@gmail.com or leave us a comment below. Thank you for watching this episode of What the Navy. The views expressed in this episode are the opinions of the cast members and do not represent the views of the United States Navy or the United States government, shipmate.